Something interesting that came up though, I wanted to touch on. So Eddie has obviously done the circuit. He's almost like apologising for the third movie now when they're talking about this fourth one. And something I think I'm like, do you even remember your own movies? Because and I don't expect them to necessarily these actors to have watched their films as much as fans like we do watch their films. But it was interesting because he said one of the issues with the third movie, why they didn't think it worked, was obviously Taggart was missing, and so the humor and some of that didn't happen, and the villain was a lot weaker than in the previous two films. And then he said there was no real stakes in that like the revenge thing was about Uncle Dave, and there was like it wasn't that exciting, so it was kind of like, well, what's Axel really fighting for? And I was kind of like, hang on, your boss from Detroit was killed at the start of the movie. I'm like,
Yeah,
did
you're
you
right.
not forget that? Like, that's still pretty big that your mentor and someone that you pissed off in two movies previously, but though deep down had your back,
Yeah,
has just been murdered at the start of the third movie. And his wife said, Axel, go get him, or go get that son of the bitch to Axel.
that's right.
And it's kind of like, how did you forget that? Because I'm like, that's a pretty good motivation for Axel to go find out who's being involved in what's happening. So I thought it was a bit of an oversight for Eddie to actually say, oh, well, we know the third one kind of had issues in production, and, Jerry Bruckheimer and Don Simpson weren't involved, and it was a different creative group. So, almost like apologising for it, which I get. Like, great. In retrospect, you come out and go, yeah, it kind of sucked. I'm sorry for it. But it's like, well, but actually know your own film too, because I think there's still a lot to work with that third film. But each their own, I guess. I mean,
I think it has become a bit of I guess, a marketing ploy in recent times when
mm,
a sequel is coming out years after the last installment, that it's almost become a thing where the cast or the crew, whoever's involved, who was in the last one, kind of goes, yeah, it's, this one's really the one. This is the best one. The last one was good, or it wasn't quite what we wanted, but this one is the one, and it's gonna and they keep talking about it's gonna be, back to the original and what made it great and what everyone loves about it. And it is, I think it must be part of like the PR handbook these days. Like, all right, if you're making like movie 4 or 5 or 6, shit on like 2, 3, 4, talk up the original, because everyone always loves the original. But then the sequels are mixed and talk about how this is the best one, and this one really goes back to it, and it doesn't worry about all the sequels, and it streamlines, and it's kind of like, what the? You do realize this is another sequel. Like, you're shitting on 2 and 3 and everything, but this is just going to be 4. Like, this is just going to be a
yeah,
part of the sequels. It's still not the original.
yeah.
So
I
it's
mean,
strange that that's the thing they do.
and I agree with you. I think it's definitely a very modern thing that's happened where people are happy to come back for another sequel, but then bag a previous sequel. And normally there's a little bit of time between, like you said, and generally there's a distance between producers or maybe studios, people that are maybe, you wouldn't have bagged, a couple of years after the film was made because they're still around or whatever, or your fate is still in their hands with the time, a bit more of a time gap, and people have moved on. It's a lot easier in hindsight to go back and sort of bag something too. So
Especially 3, because 3 is John Landis, and like he's not in control of Hollywood at the moment. He doesn't have any real power. So if Eddie Murphy says, yeah, 3 wasn't that good, and John Landis gets offended, he can't really do anything to Eddie Murphy. And they had a feud, and there's lots of other stuff that goes on with that one. So that's a really interesting one. And I'm sure there's going to be a heck of a lot that we can talk about when
yeah,
we get to rock
absolutely.
Axel F, which at the time of recording comes out tomorrow. And I know there's been a lot of press, but I feel like none of the press has been around the release date, because you told me just before we started recording was tomorrow, and I was stunned. I thought we were
Yeah,
still like 2 months off.
yeah.
Release structure.
Yeah, it's one of those things. I think if you're not watching Netflix, you're probably not going to notice it, and depending on your activity on social media, you're probably not going to notice it either. But it's definitely been one because it's not a cinema release. It's just sort of, I feel like, floated. I think when something's going to come out of cinema, they really pump it hard. You see it on bus stop shelters, you see it on buses, you see it on big billboards. But this is definitely one that we haven't seen much of. But
by definition alone, they're inferior films. Films.
Welcome back, movie fans. This is Sequels Suck, the podcast dedicated to all things sequels, prequels, remakes, and basically everything that's not the first one. My name is Angus Brown, and this is Cable Sage. How you going, mate?
Good, very good. Excited to talk about this movie. It was, again, like something we touched on, like, I can't believe it's coming out. There's so many things coming out at the moment. And in the last episode, we did touch on a few sequels, but I feel like there's even more sequels I forgot about or just didn't have a chance to mention. But
the second half of this year is insane.
Well, I actually saw Inside Out 2 today. Obviously, that's a sequel.
Have you emotionally recovered?
Yeah. Maxine is a sequel that's coming out shortly. That was another one we didn't mention. And I think we did get to it at one point, but Bad Boys 4 is obviously out at the moment as well. That's another sequel. Twisters is out tomorrow as we record. Thursday, Friday.
Thursday as we record, yes.
And I believe there's another sequel waiting in the wings that I can't think of. And then I saw the trailer for Moana 2, which is coming out in November.
For what 2?
Moana.
Oh, yeah, it is. Oh, I've been watching a lot of the Moana sequel of late. Sequel trailers, I should say, of late. Yeah, we're still going to get a lot more sequels this year, which is great. And sequels are really holding up the box office yet again. I mean, Inside Out 2 and Despicable Me 4 have really...
Oh, there's the other...
2, of course, which I argue is not a sequel, but more like a part 2 of one very long movie. But nonetheless, all the movies that have a number in the title are basically dominating the box office this year, which is exciting, I guess, for us, because it means we've got plenty to talk about, and we're not going anywhere. Which is
and just quickly on a side note, in regards to our last episode, Furiosa, some of the things we touched on, I did notice at the cinemas today, at least the posters at Village have Furiosa, a Mad Max saga, so they're keeping the whole tagline from that point of view. And then similar to what you're talking about with the cost of video on demand, I did happen to see it on my Amazon Prime. I thought, I'll just check that out. And like you said, exactly how you said, $29.99 or whatever it is to rent. And then I saw Dune 2's up already, or pretty early on. And I was like, I wonder how much that is. And to rent that is only $6.99, which goes to sort of show that it's been out a little while longer, obviously. So, but also it made a lot of money. So they don't have to worry about slugging people to $29.99.
Yeah, they don't have to worry at all that they're not going to get their money back, because they're definitely going to get their money back, which is great. I mean, we just touched on some that are coming out. I feel like it'd be remiss if I didn't mention a couple more that are coming out, because they're actually the big ones. Deadpool and Wolverine is still coming out this year. Beetlejuice is still coming out this year.
Yes. Yep.
Joker Folie à Deux is still coming out this year, and Gladiator 2 is still coming out this year.
And that's I think Gladiator 2 is the one that we probably haven't mentioned. And I'm not going to lie, I'm a massive Gladiator fan. That's probably... I do change my top 10, 20. When I say change, it just they slightly move depending on the mood and rotating. But I would easily Gladiators in my top 20 movies of all time. So I'm not saying that's the best 20 movies. I'm saying they're the ones that I would go to. They're the comfort movies, the ones I enjoy watching. That's definitely
I agree.
There. So I definitely have a lot of skepticism and worry about a sequel to a movie that, I mean, they were talking about a sequel straight after the original, and it's been how long, and a lot of water has gone under the bridge, and I wonder where they're going to go with this film.
Well, I mean, I'm sure we'll cover this in our Gladiator 2 episode, but I remember the original pitch was Ghost Russ. It was going to be like Russell Crowe. Spoiler alert, he dies at the end of Gladiator. It was going to be... Piss off, it's like 20 years old. But yeah, it was going to be like Maximus in the underworld, and now we've got a totally new cast. And I'm excited. Ridley Scott's back. I'm excited to see where he goes. Sometimes Ridley Scott in this current iteration of his career, sometimes he's amazing, and sometimes he is. Look, he's Ridley Scott. I don't want to ever say he's not amazing, but sometimes he makes a version of the film that is not what I personally would like to see. But you know, he's still Ridley Scott. So I'm.
Oh, look, again, Ridley Scott's definitely made some great movies that I've enjoyed over the journey. Alien being another one of those films, and we've talked about Aliens, but I do wonder if Ridley maybe getting a little bit older, and maybe his decision making, and or maybe the cash has been thrown his way that not the smartest decisions have been made, or maybe he's still been overly ambitious with the last couple of big films he's made. So that's where I'm a bit worried about Gladiator 2. I think Prometheus and Covenant were interesting films, expanding the origins of the Xenomorph and the Alien films, but I still feel like they really bit off more than they can chew. Maybe got too ambitious, but that's a whole out. That's another episode. So
That's another episode, and one we'll absolutely get to. But it's not far off from where we are now, because we are talking today about a sequel to a movie from quite a long time ago, going back to not quite as old as Alien, but pretty darn close. We're talking Beverly Hills Cop, Axel F. Which, for if you're confused, it's the fourth Beverly Hills Cop.
Yep.
Right out of the gate, I hate this title, Cable. I hate it. I hate this title. I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. It's just almost nobody outside of like insane film fans like us knows that the theme song is called Axel F.
Yeah.
So the theme song that if you're aware of the Beverly Hills Cop movies and you've heard the theme song in all the movies, like, oh, that's from Beverly Hills Cop. That song is called Axel F. And that is why this movie is called Axel F. We've talked about it before. I'm never going to let it go. I do not like when film franchises pivot their titling.
Yeah.
Franchise. The only one I think that hasn't like really frustrated me is the Mission Impossible series. They ditch numbers after 3. We talked about this in other episodes. A lot of franchises do not like the number 4 in their titles. They ditch it. They get nervous. I don't know. What do you think about the title? Do you care? Did you even notice? Is it just me who gets bothered about shit like that?
I did notice. Well, I mean, I go, oh yeah, Beverly Hills Cop, Beverly Hills Cop 2, Beverly Hills Cop 3. Like, this should be 4. I didn't hate it, but I do feel like it's a bit like, hello, don't remember us, because I think we know it's Axel. Like, I mean, and Eddie's on the poster. Like, I don't know why you have to tell us it's Axel F. And even then, it's weird. Like you said, that's the title of the musical score. It became even more famous by Crazy Frog years later. But even just Axel F, is it called Axel Foley? Or I'm confused. I hear what you're saying. Maybe they think a newer generation or whatever. They don't want to pigeonhole themselves into number 4, and maybe people not watching it. But I don't know.
You know what the title feels like to me, and it kind of is. It feels like the title you give to a TV movie. Like, you know how we used to get pre-streaming, we used to get a big film and then you get like a direct-to-video sequel, or sometimes you would get a direct-to-TV. Like, we used to have TV movies, and they're a big thing. And it feels like the title you give a series where you get a new actor to play the lead and it goes to TV, or it's like a 2-hour-long episode of a pilot for a TV show.
It's funny you say that.
Which maybe that's reaction to this, because in our research we've come across this. There was almost a TV show.
Which Eddie was definitely, I don't know how heavily involved, but I remember it being advertised, or at least I remember reading about it years ago when they were talking about it. And he was going to still be in it, sort of, but would be a smaller role, and it would be all about his son.
The pilot, and then maybe like every couple episodes he'd be like on a video chat or something. But yeah, it was Eddie's son was the main character, Foley Jr. And maybe that's why they called this Axel F, to let everyone know this isn't that failed pilot, that this is Eddie Murphy. I also think things like giving him a daughter instead of a son is like a very clear reactionary thing to like, no, that never happened. That was a mistake. We're just doing original timeline. But it's an interesting one. I'll tell you that right out of the gate, because Eddie Murphy is kind of in this semi-resurgence, I feel like, at the moment, where he was made some movies towards the tail end of his big screen career that didn't do so great. Things like your Pluto Nashes and your Haunted Mansions that, whether or not you like those films, they didn't do gangbusters at the box office, and they haven't really left a huge legacy for him. He was kind of looking for what to do. Then he sort of just went away for a bit. There was the Scary Spice controversy about, children and things. There's all sorts of controversies around him. And then he kind of went away. And then Netflix resurrected. He had Dreamgirls, which was his Oscar bid. He didn't get it. He had Mr. Church, which was his big thing. He was going to get an Oscar. That failed quite badly at the box office. He was gone. When I saw an interview with him, his relaunch plan, because he's a very smart businessman, his relaunch plan was to do Dolomite Is My Name, which was a Netflix movie, which I think is great. I think it's a really, really good film. He was going to do a stand-up special, kind of like what Adam Sandler did. And then COVID came along and he couldn't tour and do any of his material. And he's like, forget that. And then he started doing streaming movies. So he's also done, I don't know if you've seen it, a Christmas one for Prime. Candy Cane Lane came out this Christmas just gone. Now he's back with Axel F. He's really leaned into.
And he's coming to America too.
Coming number 2 America too for Prime as well.
Yeah.
So he's really embraced, I guess, the streaming era. Unlike Adam Sandler, who locked in with Netflix and was like, "I'll just make a million Netflix movies. I don't give a shit." God bless, because most of them are pretty fun. He's bouncing around. I don't know. I guess this is the first thing I wanted to ask, and to has he got his groove back? What did you think after watching Axel Foley return to the screen?
I would probably say with Eddie, I was a massive fan in the early 90s once I started. Like, I was aware of Eddie in the early 80s, but obviously it was not age appropriate for me to know too much about Eddie at that point.
Nothing.
And then my dad would have got, I know my dad must have seen Delirious or whatever. And then that was one of those things that, again, in school, either late primary school or early high school, there was always a tape. Someone had the tape of Raw and Delirious and that. And when I say tape, I mean audio tape. And that would sort of get passed around and you'd listen to it and stuff like that. And I had, like, obviously tape deck, could, put the headphones on and listen. And obviously it was peak with, Coming to America, Beverly Hills Cop, all those sort of things. And then obviously the Delirious and Raw and those specials. And then he went into, I think Nutty Professor was the last one that I feel like he was still a bit naughty. It was a bit, a lot of sexual innuendos, a little bit more kind of nasty, a bit mean. And you could kind of feel like Eddie was ad-libbing a lot of stuff. And then he obviously had he did multiple characters in that. And that was obviously an extension of the Coming to America thing where he did a few characters there. So he went all out in the Nutty Professor, and there was a lot of great jokes in that. And then after that, it was like he was like, I've got kids now, I've got to kind of do more family-friendly stuff. So he did Daddy Daycare and all. And then it was just like he was a very restrained actor. Like I felt like he was trying to do funny stuff, but he's like, it didn't hit the same because he was like this like PG-13 version of what he previously was. And for a long time I think that's where he's also fallen off. And it sounds horrible to say, but I feel like he needs to be crude and funny. And I don't know, maybe is that just me or
no? I think he definitely, I mean, he made his name as like this kind of wunderkind. He was a teenager when he started doing stand-up. And he did Saturday Night Live, and he did Raw, and he did Delirious, and he was a phenomenon for being this I don't give a fuck young black man, which is highly significant, saying like whatever he wanted to say and kind of dominating the entertainment. Like he's one of those, he's kind of like, I guess, Elvis in a way, that he was so good as a comedian and so entertaining as a comedian. They're like, put this guy in movies and build a movie around him. We don't even give a shit if he can act. Let's just build a story around him and get it out into the world as quick as we can. And we got things like 48 Hours coming out. Because like, let's just put this guy in a fucking movie. And as it turns out, he's that talented that when you put him in a movie, he's still funny and he's still entertaining. But I think part of what made Eddie Murphy is that unfiltered, I don't give a fuck. Now, obviously, like, you watch Raw or Delirious these days, and 90% of it, you're like, my God, that is completely unsayable these days. Some of his jokes, most of his jokes, they just hit every corner of, no, you can't say that. But his persona was, I'm going to say whatever the fuck I want, and you're going to laugh because I'm going to be so funny. And everyone's like, yeah, even on Saturday Night Live, which is like the most filtered that he was in that part of his career, because obviously live TV, he couldn't do a lot of swearing, but he still found a way to be quite progressive and quite, I don't know, I guess edgy. But once he transitioned to films, that was it. The brakes were off, and he's like, "No, I'm going to just be the most vulgar." And the '80s, obviously, comedies were for grown-ups, and I think
Yeah.
that's the transition. Is like in the '80s, comedies were for like older teens and adults, and they were
Yeah.
sexual. They, '80s comedies notoriously have a phenomenal amount of unnecessary nudity. They have lots of swearing. They have sex. They have fight. It's grown up stuff. And then as we get into the '90s, as you pointed out, the kids who were kids in the '80s started to become teens, but the culture had changed, and you couldn't be as graphic, and you couldn't be as full on. And that's when those edgy comedians did that pivot, and things like suddenly Eddie Murphy, the guy who did Delirious and 48 Hours and Beverly Hills Cop, is the voice of a donkey in a cartoon.
Yeah, well, yeah.
And it's baffling to think that could happen, but it happened to a lot of the greats. I think this movie is a really interesting artifact. And I think, in fact, now looking back, all 4 Beverly Hills Cop films are a really interesting artifact of what comedy has become. Because one is funny as hell. It's an action movie. It's famously, Beverly Hills Cop was not a comedy. It was a Sylvester Stallone movie.
Yes.
Sylvester Stallone didn't do it. Eddie Murphy came in, and he's like, "Well, obviously, if I'm in it, there's going to be jokes," and they just kind of let him cook. And I think that's part of what made number 1 so good, is they let Eddie Murphy lead the way. And then 2, same again, very heavy on action and violence. But then you've got Eddie Murphy. Basically, it feels like the first 2 are, we're going to make a full-on action movie, but the hero is going to be hilarious. And so anytime that he wants to say something funny, we're going to let him. Then 3, we're getting into the '90s, and John Landis is directing, and it's at an amusement park, and it's kind of bloodless, and there's a lot less swearing, and it's a lot less edgy. And now 4, we're streaming. You can do whatever you want.
Yep.
Like, this is the internet. But Netflix has shareholders, and we want to get as many clicks as possible. And if the family can watch Axel F, then that means we're, getting more people. If guys like us who are in their 40s now and want to sit down and watch Axel F can also sit down with, our kids potentially, and know that it's okay for our kids to watch it in a different way to, like, my mum showed me Beverly Hills Cop when I was a kid, and I was too young, but she showed me Raw and Delirious as well. She didn't give a shit. But it is interesting to look at how comedy has changed. And these 4 films, I think, come at the perfect time throughout the last, 30 something years, nearly 40 years, to represent comedies. Kind of mainstream comedy, movie comedies are kind of neutered now. And I don't know how you felt about this. I didn't laugh out loud once in this movie. Now, it's not to say I didn't enjoy it, but I didn't laugh out loud once.
Okay. That is sad. I would say that I probably, I'm probably wasn't that far behind you, but there's definitely some nods to the originals and some of the gags or some of the things that were said.
Absolutely.
I did laugh out loud and thought it was quite clever or funny, but I definitely feel similar to, and this is, that little bit, I will tack on to the start of this podcast, what we sort of discussed about, Eddie coming out and kind of bashing the third one or making an apology, saying, there was reasons why the third one wasn't as good and blah, blah, blah. One of the other problems I had with the third one was he did feel restrained, and I don't know if that was purposeful or that was script or John Landis or whatever. The first and second movie, he came in and I'm sure there was like, this is going to be the scene. We need you to ad-lib that you're some guy to sneak into a venue or whatever. And he would come up with this whole story. Yeah, I'm Johnny Wishbone, psychic extraordinaire. And he would just, and it'd be just, it's so good. Yeah, exactly. Whereas the third had almost none of that, where he was sneaking. Yeah, he had his charms to talk to people, but he never had any make-up characters that he did to get into places and weasel his way in. And the same thing here. There wasn't any really that. And then when he did go to do it, and we expected him to, he started sort of failing, and the daughter had to swoop in and get him into that party. And I was kind of like, they were him saying, well, he's lost that sort of charm.
That scene bummed me out. The scene where he failed at being the fire marshal, and then the other scene where he goes to the hotel and he comes in with this accent, his thing, and then he stops himself after. He's like, I'm too tired. I just want a room.
Yeah.
And they're like, $900. He's like, I love Beverly Hills. Like, there's not even any indication that he's going to rip them off or put a fake credit, like anything. It's just kind of like it felt. I didn't like that scene, and that's probably the only scene I can think of off the top of my head that I flat out didn't like. Because like, oh, that like you beat Axel Foley. The world has beaten him. Like he's stayed Axel Foley all these years to his own detriment, but he doesn't care. But when he walks in and he's trying to do the thing and he's just too tired, I'm like, oh, the world wins. Like you might beat the bad guy at the end of this movie, but the bigger, like you've lost the war. That kind of really hit me. It's like, oh, that shouldn't happen. Axel Foley doesn't give up ever.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't matter.
And that's yeah. I mean, maybe that's a realistic look at maybe how the characters aged over the years, and maybe that's how it would be in real life. But we tune in to watch a movie called Axel F. Beverly Hills Cop, and for him not to be able to do some of his things that we loved him for in those, especially the first two movies, I think kind of sucked.
Yeah, like if you're gonna bring him back strong.
Yeah.
And there's a few moments in this movie that again, like it's just personal preference, but I feel like they zigged when they could have zagged. I guess we should probably outline what this is. So this movie is Axel. He's still Axel Foley, a Detroit detective. He hasn't moved up in the ranks. He just wants to be a street detective. He's got Paul Reiser back, who is now the captain.
Jeffrey!
Which is great. His relationship with Jeffrey is unchanged. I love that. Like he doesn't call him captain. He just calls him Jeffrey. Great. Taggart is back. Rosewood is back. Saj is back. Everyone's back. It's great. I love seeing them all back. But
Serge was back.
Yeah. They have to go to... He has to go to Beverly Hills because he has a daughter who's estranged from, who's a lawyer, who gets into trouble with a client, and Rosewood calls him and is like, hey, man, your daughter's in trouble. I think that's a great plot device to get him back to Beverly Hills. Like, how many friggin' times can a guy have to go to Beverly Hills for something? Well, this honestly made sense. Like, it's his kid. Why wouldn't he go? But where they zigged, and I wish they had a zagged, and I'll preface this by saying, I love Joseph Gordon-Levitt. I want to see him in any movie he wants to be in. I'm glad he's in this movie. Put him in every movie. I wish that Rosewood had have been the sidekick. Like, why have him there and just have him in the bookend of the film when you could have had Axel and Rosewood teaming up for most of the movie, trying to get Taggart on board, failing because Rosewood is no longer a cop. He's turned in his badge because Taggart wouldn't back him about the fact that this cop is a dirty cop. All great stuff. Like, really, it's something I loved about is that is the kind of overly ridiculous but also incredibly simplified 80s plot that you would have seen in the first Beverly Hills Cop. Where's Billy? He turned in his badge because he says this cop's dirty and I don't think he is because I trained him at the academy, god damn it. Like, that's pure 80s. I was like, yes, great, please. Like when Top Gun Maverick was just like, the enemy, and you're like, which enemy? And they're like, never mind. Like, I want my action comedy stupid, and I love that they kept it stupid. But god damn it, you had Judge Reinhold.
It's definitely
the movie.
It's definitely very stupid. I thought the same thing. I did wonder if it was a money thing or it came down to, Judge Reinhold wanting to be sort of involved but couldn't be too super involved, or again, like I said, I'm not sure what money or availability. I don't imagine Judge Reinhold's doing a lot these days. Not that I've looked at his IMDb recently, but
I would say, like, if you have the opportunity to be in Beverly Hills Cop 4, you clear your friggin' schedule. Like,
and so
this is your legacy, Judge Reinhold.
I agree with you.
And Fast Times.
Yeah, I agree with you. I didn't mind kind of the plot device of him being on the outs because he believes in dirty cops and he's whatever. But the fact that he's not in it for very much at all. Like, what was he in it for? 10 minutes, not even. I think
maybe
that was
screen time. Yeah,
and I
he's
think
just
that,
bookending it.
And I do think that that's where they stuffed up. I agree with you. I think some of the great comedy is the back and forth between Billy and Axel, and the fact that we
Judge Reinhold still got it. He was still a great Billy Rosewood. He hasn't lost it. They all were actually. I was really impressed at how the returning characters all absolutely nailed what their characters were. Like, it was like Taggart, like he hates his wife, he hates his job, but he hates his job less than he hates his wife, so he's gone back to work after retiring. Was it at the end of 2 he retires and then
he was retired.
Whatever, man. Great.
Look, at the end of the day, we can't. There's leaps of faith that we take with the script and some of the action and what we see in these movies. Sometimes I like, oh, really? I thought it was lazy writing because I'm like, Taggart's not going to be in the position he is in if he was retired. Like, I'm
What do you mean?
sorry.
He just came back. He just rejoined.
Nah, I see. Yeah, I don't know. And yeah, the fact that he wasn't in the third one, I think, I don't know. Like, it was good to see him back, but maybe they could have had him. I just think it would have been fun to see Taggart more, possibly in the Billy role in this movie, in that he's the one that is still retired, or he may have come back and done a little bit of stuff with the police, and then finally retired, and Billy was still in a decent position, and then Taggart could be the one that has more invested because he's maybe, one of the cops could have been his kid, or alternatively, again, someone, a family member, someone he has trust in, that could have been the issue, and then he's the one that's sort of almost doing his Axel Foley by not sort of quitting on it, and then I don't know. I think Billy would have been.
I would have liked to see Billy and Taggart running a detective agency together. They're both not cops anymore,
Yeah.
and they run it together, and it's just an absolute nightmare because they're always at each other, but they love each other. And then Foley comes to town, and you also would have a bit of a twist because this time, he's in Beverly Hills to help solve a crime, but he has no help from the police department. He's kind of like back to where he was in the first movie, where he doesn't have anyone on his side. And he's got to try and help his daughter. Like I said, this is just personal preference stuff. They zigged where I was like, oh, you could have done this, or you could have done that, or you could have done that. And I do always get a bit bummed when you get movies like this that have been, because this has been in development for a very long time. They've been talking about making a fourth Beverly Hills Cop pretty much since Beverly Hills Cop 3. And it does feel like it just got overcooked in parts. Like you just had too many writers, too long to think about it. You overthought it. Like we just said, Beverly Hills Cop 1 was an action movie. Instead of Sylvester Stallone, you get Eddie Murphy. And on the fly, you've got to be like, I guess it's a comedy now. And you let one of our generation's greatest comedians create this iconic character in this hilarious and also interesting movie. And I feel like maybe they just overthought a few things in this one. I also wonder if maybe one of the things is, it's a first-time director. It's a first-time director making this movie, an Australian. Mark Malloy is his name. If you've never heard of him, it's because he's only done a couple of ads. He did some Apple commercials and a few other things. I thought he did a great job. I think this movie holds together really well. It looks really good. It's shot really well. And I think for a first-time director, taking on a Netflix movie with Eddie Murphy as the star, that also happens to be a Beverly Hills Cop movie, pretty monumental task. This franchise also, and correct me if I'm wrong, but this franchise is every entry has been directed by a different director. I can't think of another film franchise where every single film has been directed by a different director, and that includes the Bond franchise, where directors have repeated, sometimes back to back, sometimes years apart. But Fast and the Furious had a couple of repeats in there. These days, Mission Impossible, Macquarie is kind of the guy, unless you're counting like a 1-2 punch like Top Gun, where there's only 2 films and there's 2 directors. But once you get to around 4, I can't think of anyone where every single entry is a different director.
No, it's
we
different.
had Martin Brest, we had Tony Scott, we had John Landis, and now we've had Mark Malloy. That's sort of fascinating on its own, I think.
No, I don't disagree. I hadn't really thought about it, but yeah, you're right. It's definitely, everyone's put their stamp on the franchise as a director. But look, I mean, if it's his first movie, like, it's a great effort. I think, like you said, I think visually it was a great movie. I think it wasn't, like we talked about Furiosa having the action, a lack of action, maybe budget-wise. I did feel like there was a lot of action in this movie. Maybe I'm wrong. I have to go back.
Netflix gave him some cash for sure. Like, there's a helicopter flight and a crash. It's a real helicopter.
Well, I was going to say, and then the snowplow at the start, and the amount of cars getting ripped up there, and then the police cars that were, you got, there was a lot of damage.
A lot of practical stuff. A lot of real cars got smashed up in this movie, and that was cool. And I really would have liked to have seen that in a cinema on a big screen.
Yes, well, I guess that's the contentious point. Well, I mean, what are your thoughts about the fact that it was I guess in this era's version, a straight-to-video movie, practically? Like, should it have had a cinema release or not?
I mean, from an audience point of view, definitely. However, in the year 2024, with the cast that this movie has, I get like you got a first-time director, Eddie Murphy, who has not been in a huge box office smash since Dreamgirls, and it was not an Eddie Murphy movie. That was a pivot for him to be in it. So Eddie Murphy, name above the title, box office smash. It's been a long time. So Judge Reinhold, the God forgive me, I can't even remember Taggart's real name, and I feel
John
like
Aston.
thank you, John Aston. Even Joseph Gordon-Levitt is kind of past his box office, name above the title stuff. Really, I think for him, Snowden may have been his last cinematic release. Name above the title, Joseph Gordon-Levitt, his face on the poster. Snowden, that's it. And he had a run pretty recently where he was, name above the title box office guy. His daughter, I don't know that I've seen the actor who
Yeah,
plays his
no,
daughter. I think
she
she might
looks
have done some TV.
semi-familiar, but like I wasn't.
I mean, the biggest name in this movie is
It's
Kevin Bacon,
yeah.
who we haven't mentioned yet. Who I will say this, I don't know how you felt about it. The second that Axel Foley walked in the room and Kevin Bacon was sitting there, I'm like, oh, so that's the bad guy.
Yeah.
That's the bad guy. I feel like halfway through they gave up trying to make it a secret, and they're like, "No, look, it's just too obvious. He's the bad guy. We're just gonna tell everyone he's the bad guy." It was
and
obvious.
that was what disappointed me as well. And I agree. I had no idea Kevin was in the movie until I watched watched it, and then the same thing. As soon as I saw him with Taggart, or I think it was the same that he was Taggart.
Yeah, he walks in the office and he's sitting on the couch.
And I'm like,
as soon as I saw him on the couch, I'm like, "Well, you're a bad guy."
Yeah, I'm like, he's involved, and the problem, the irony being that, again, going to what we chatted about last week when I was saying how Eddie was apologising for the third film and it being a bit weak and this and that and having its issues. They leaned into the same thing again. The bad guys were the cops, or again, it was inside job, and then they had that guy that was who was the other inside guy in the third one? Was he DEA or something? But again, same thing. It's like you've got all these dirty cops, and it's like you've done the same thing again. I'm like, really? Did we? I'm like, I don't know. Was that lazy as well, or was that? I don't know. Or the fake out should have been that Kevin wasn't the bad guy.
There was a brief moment where I thought, oh, he's faking out, and he's actually kind of undercover as well as like he's pretending to be dirty to get in with them. And I started to think that when they had Luis Guzman doing basically an extended cameo as the one seen as the cartel boss who loves karaoke and eye makeup, which I thought was really fun.
Yeah.
But when you introduce him as kind of the lovable bad guy, which you get in a lot of like 80s action comedies, there's like a bad guy who's bad guy, but you can't help but like him. So you kind of like, he's not that bad. And he was a little too lovable. And I was like, oh, what if what they're doing is they're really playing hard that Kevin Bacon is the bad guy, and they're really playing hard that Luis Guzman is like the lovable bad guy, but he's not that bad. And, we're going to find out that actually Kevin Bacon, is trying to trick everyone, and he's working with the cartel, but he's actually a good guy. He's trying to sneak in plain sight. And then the second that scene's over, like they literally walk out of the bar, we're like, oh, maybe Luis Guzman is going to turn out to be the big bad. Kevin Bacon just plants cocaine on them and arrests them. You're like, oh no, you are definitely bad. You're definitely a bad guy. There goes that idea.
I think, I don't know whether they could have tightened the script up enough for us to have a few more red herrings, because I'll tell you this, the first time we met Joseph Gordon-Levitt, I actually thought he seemed a little bit sus, and I'm like, oh, he's going to be someone that's involved.
He never plays a bad guy.
And I thought, oh, he's going to be the one that's sort of behind the scenes as well. And then obviously very quickly I'm like, nah, I don't think he's on the table anymore. I think he's definitely, on the right side of things. But I think they went to the well with that again too much.
I mean, Dirty Cops is a very 80s thing. Again, I like they tried to keep it in the tone so that Axel didn't feel too out of things, and they did a good job of making it feel like Axel Foley could conceivably still be a powerful and I guess important force in this case and in crime, and the stuff
But
at the start with the snowplay, like, oh yeah, he's still got
yeah,
it, and then in this, like, no, he's still smart, like he's still street smart,
yeah.
and he still sees things that the others don't see, and he fits into this, but
And I think what I will say though, it does lend itself to, it makes sense that Taggart and Rosewood have a falling out is because of Taggart believing or trusting another member, and it kind of makes sense to the dirty cop
that was kind of
angle.
muddy. Like you don't
Yeah.
find that out until well into the film, and when you do, it's kind of awkwardly handled.
Mm,
Like that's not. I feel like for what an important part of the movie that was, that should have been a bit more
mm,
like signposted and a bit earlier on in the movie. Like Billy isn't a cop anymore because he believes this guy is the bad guy, and he believed it so strongly that when I didn't back him, he quit the force.
mm,
And I feel like they tried for a moment to throw some suspicion on Taggart
mm.
when Foley is like, "Are you in on this too?" Because Taggart is so adamant
So
that the bad guy's the bad guy.
fuck off, get out of my office.
But then when he did
Yeah.
that, when he's like, "Get the fucking mouse," I'm like, "Oh, we're gonna find out that they had a quiet conversation to pretend that he's like thrown Axel out, and that's also what he did with Billy, so that Billy could secretly get this guy, and now he's doing it to Axel." No, he just flat out believes that the most sinister looking version of Kevin Bacon I've ever seen in my life. Like he has played bad guys in lots of stuff. This is like the baddest bad guy he's ever been. And he does it with a grin. And that is where I feel like a first time director maybe missed a few things, where maybe when he's like looking at the shot and Kevin's sitting there in his expensive suit and he does that Kevin Bacon grin, which can sometimes be very charming and sometimes be very sinister because he's an incredibly good actor. And he makes it sinister. The first time director could have gone, "Hey, Kevin, can we get some options? Because I don't know if we want to give away from the moment we see you that you are the villain."
Yeah.
But they don't. And he just does that grin and you're like, bad guy.
Well, the fact that they went to that club early on and he's associating with these guys that were after Axel, it was kind of like, well,
Not even hiding it.
Yeah,
like,
and
how's he
I'm
getting
like,
away with it? He's just hanging out with these criminals who are shooting up the street. And they're
mm,
like, those guys are shooting up the street. And he's like, yeah, well, sometimes you've got to hire criminals because warrants get in the way. And you're like,
yeah,
even if you're not the bad guy, you're still a very bad cop.
yeah, and I agree, and that was what made me think. Well, I already was suspicious of you now. Well, you just leaned right into it because it just shows your moral line. The compass is already off. So if you're going to already go down that path, or and the fact that Axel notices he's got particular Gucci shoes or something, and he's got the Rolex, and he's obviously got money, and it's kind of like, well, you're not really hiding it either. Like it's
He's like, "I own this watch and I'm going to enjoy it." It's like, but you are a cop, and we know there's no way on earth that however high ranking you are, you can't afford, what is that, Ferrari he drives or something, and Gucci shoes and a Rolex. Like, there's no possible. How is Eternal Affairs not immediately on this guy?
Yeah, I think there are probably the odd exceptions worldwide where some sort of member of the force may have had rich parents or something along those lines, or they've got an inheritance and
Like Mike Lowry and Bad Boys.
Yeah.
They tell you out of the gate, my folks are rich. That's why I drive cool cars, because we want cool cars in this movie.
And that's
brilliant.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, you can kind of explain some of that stuff, but generally speaking, police don't make that much money, and if you had that much money, you wouldn't be doing the job. Trust me.
Exactly.
And that's the thing. I think that's where it's like, oh, come on, you could have made the villain a little bit more. I don't know. I nothing against Kevin Bacon. I just didn't like it because I think you want to have a bit of suspense
did
to the
what
movie.
he was told to do. I just wish that wasn't what they told him to do. I wish that they had a twist or covered it, or had even one line where he's like, "That's a nice looking watch." He's like, "Gift from my wife. Her family's quite well off." Oh, okay. Now there's reasonable doubt. Maybe you're not that bad. Maybe you just have a really rich. Maybe you married rich. And the fact that you married rich and you're still doing the job, well, maybe you do really care. Maybe now I have to reconsider whether or not I'm just judging you for doing that sinister Kevin Bacon grin. Nah, none of that. Hey, I think that guy's the bad guy. I'm the bad guy. Hey, that guy's the bad guy. Like that was the way that plot
I
went.
know. I feel like as soon as he walked in, there should have been the neon sign above him in the bar, just saying "bad guy," just pointing down.
And I do feel like there were parts of this movie outside of that where they kind of, I don't know, they half did it. Like the impound scene where they go to the impound and there's that guy who's behind the counter, and Axel figures out really quickly he wants to be an actor, so he plays into that and tells him, we're going to give you the lead, and does this whole thing. And I'm like, okay, this is kind of fun. This feels like classic Axel. And then they go and check out the cars. We're done with that guy forever. Like there should have been a tag to that scene. There should be either he should have been at the end of that scene, or he should have popped up in another scene, or there should have been something that made it like slightly worthwhile spending that much time. Because really what I felt like when they did that scene was Axel was just absolutely destroying that guy's life.
Yeah.
Like this guy's working in impound lot, trying to break into acting in Hollywood. This guy comes off the street, he's like, oh my God, I want you to be in this movie. You are going to be the lead. This guy's like, oh my God, it's coming. He was a nice character. Like if he was a jerk, we could have been like, suck it. It was like, no, Axel just completely built that guy up to think his life was about to change and then walked away. And that's just mean. That's just a mean thing to do to a kid. What are you doing, Axel?
Yeah, 100%.
Like have a tag where he's, I don't know, kicking a dog or something. Like give us a reason to be on Axel's side. I was so upset at the end of that scene. I was like, what do you mean that's it?
Yeah.
You better come back. Like this kid better show up like just before the credits. And I don't know, something happens and he gets his break, or Axel better be watching TV, or he drive past a poster and this kid's face is on the poster because something is like, give us anything. That was just, it's like the movie forgot to pay that off. And there's just little bits like that kind of came to this. I was like, I don't feel like that would have happened in Beverly Hills Cop 1 or 2. I feel like we would have, even 3, honestly, I feel like we would have got a payoff. If you're going to spend, I think that scene was like 2.5 minutes of them talking to that kid, at least, maybe 3 in not a very long movie. And it really, like, why didn't you just jump the fence? If all you needed to do was get to the car.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. Like it's and you kind of wish, like, the more I think about it, like I said, like Axel will spin a story to get where he needs to get the information he wants. But
which is great. I love they showed us him doing that.
But he's generally not mean-spirited unless the person is maybe a bit of a jerk or a bit overly officious. He might be. But you're right. The kid is just doing his job and, he's pumping his tyres up thinking he's going to have this experience, and it's all for nothing. What do you think about Shooter? Sorry. Yeah, go.
No, you go.
What do you think about Shooter McGavin being in the movie?
Oh, that was amazing. I love that.
That was funny. So I was like, oh, they're really getting into this. I don't know what, he's just out of my mind, his name. But he's so funny. He's really leaned into, last couple of years, Shooter McGavin.
Christopher McDonald,
that's it.
Yeah.
He's really leaned into the whole Shooter McGavin stuff. So he will get on social media. He will respond to most people. He likes to have a laugh, take the piss out of himself. And the fact that they're doing Happy Gilmore 2, which is a Netflix film, I'm pretty sure, that'll show.
I'm sorry, I'm here. This is the first time hearing about this live on air.
Well, you didn't know there's going to be a Happy Gilmore 2.
I didn't know there was going to
There's going to be a Happy Gilmore 2.
I don't want that to happen. It's not going to be as good. I'm not excited. I'm worried.
And that's
that movie is perfect.
As soon as I saw that, I'm like, oh, that's what they're doing. They're bringing him back, and it's just like a teaser for the next. I'm surprised they didn't have a trailer for Happy Gilmore at the end of this one. I
am absolutely ecstatic that it's like canon now that Happy Gilmore and Axel Foley exist in the same universe. I think that's make that the multiverse.
Yeah.
You know what? Instead of maybe do Happy Gilmore 2, whatever, but for the one after that, do Happy and Axel, do like a Deadpool and Wolverine style and bring them together in an adventure. Can you imagine Eddie Murphy and Adam Sandler as Axel Foley and Happy Gilmore in like a buddy cop movie where this rage-induced golfer and old man Axel Foley have to team up to solve a crime? Like, I'm more excited about that than the actual Happy Gilmore 2 that we're getting, and about Axel F, which we're talking about. I want that movie. I want Happy and Axel.
That's probably another podcast too, because I think the idea of a multiverse or some crazy mashups. Actually, more exciting than they would now than they would have been 10, 15 years ago. Like, yeah, why would you want to have those two movies cross over? But now, I think, I don't know, just entertainment. I think there's something about
Especially if it's going to go
multiverse.
straight to Netflix anyway. Like you don't have to worry about,
Yeah.
marketing, advertising. You don't have to worry about how do you reckon we can sell this? No, just chuck it on Netflix.
Mm.
It is all the internet will talk about for 4 days, which is all you care about anyway. Your
Yeah.
algorithm will love it. You'll fucking punch out billions of numbers of people being like, I gotta see what this is.
Hmm.
And then whatever most people forget, and then people like us will be like, I've watched it 14 times. I'm so excited about it.
Mm.
Like, just do it, man. Let's start campaigning now. Hashtag happy and Axel. Everyone get on
Sorry,
board.
did we finish talking? Like, I know we've been jumping all over the place in excitement and talking about this movie, but are we happy that it did go straight to Netflix, or was a Netflix thing? Like, because I still feel like,
I'm not
personally, I
happy.
would have seen it at the cinema.
I would
I,
I would have paid money. I don't know how many people
yeah.
outside of, but I guess
Do
Axel Foley's a
you,
big thing.
but
Like
do
my
you
mum
put?
would have gone to the movies to see it,
Would I think there's ways of looking at it. You go, well, you don't do it as a massive release. You just do it maybe as a small release, similar to, because this release actually made me think of two films and why maybe they went this way as well. And I mean, admittedly, it's Netflix, but I think again, I don't know how Netflix works internally, decision making wise. But you'd like to think if Netflix started making something and it started getting traction, and they go, hang on a sec, we could have this go for a 2 or 3 week run at the cinemas, and capitalize there as well, and then also have it on streaming too. So if people want to do either or, I feel like this movie you could have given it a month run at the cinemas. Again, not a huge release, but just a couple. Every cinema have it on a couple of times a day. Again, for nostalgia, people might go and see it. I would have loved to have been in a packed cinema watching this movie. Like you said, those laugh
I
out
think if they
loud
did a
moments.
limited release, it could have worked. Absolutely.
Because the funny thing is, it reminds me of, so Kevin Smith did, with Jane Silent Bob Rebooted. That never got a wide release. That was almost like a straight to video Blu-ray type scenario, or maybe even Netflix. But he did do a tour where they
Yeah.
did small releases and
Well, he
did a
did it
Q
too
and
where
A
you could
stuff.
only see the movie for the first couple of months. You could only see the
Yeah.
movie when he came to your town, and it was like a live show.
Yes.
It was like you could
Yeah.
only see it when it was him live with Jamie Hughes, and they would present
Yeah.
it. They'd watch it. They do a Q&A afterwards, or do a podcast recording after, whatever it was. And it's a great idea
Yeah.
because he tapped in his fan base. I don't think Eddie Murphy is gonna
No.
do anything like that, but
No.
I do think if they had, because they did do a lot of press for it. Like Eddie did a
Mm.
lot of press. Most
Mm.
he's done in years. I think if they did a limited release, it would have anyone who was going to see it. Like if you said it's in cinemas for 2 weeks, it's a big action movie. It's got some great action set pieces.
Mm.
Really like lean into that like big screen experience. The people who were going to see it would go and see it. You get your hype. I do. My very limited understanding of Netflix is they are against theatrical releases for the most part. And usually when you see a Netflix movie in cinemas, it's because the director is someone like Martin Scorsese or Bradley Cooper who has some sway, and they kind of demand it because you need some kind of theatrical window to be eligible for Oscars.
Yeah, gotcha, yeah.
So if they think that they've got their Oscar movie, they'll do like a limited release, and they'll do basically the exact number of days. It's something whoever's listened to this and knows more than me will probably yell, but it's something like, let's say off the top of my head, it's like 19 days. If a movie is in cinemas for less than 19 days, it's not eligible for an Academy Award. If it is, then it can go in the Oscar race. So they do things like that. They did it with The Irishman. They did it with Maestro, I believe. They do really short runs. They pull it, and then they wait like a week for people to forget that it was released in cinemas, and they put it up on Netflix.
Yeah.
Netflix's whole model is they want it to be exclusively on Netflix. The only place you can see it is Netflix. So if you want to see Beverly Hills Cop 4, you have to have a Netflix subscription. And that's why, they do just pure releases like that. It's monetary. And look, I think it's a double-edged sword because I don't think a big studio is going to make Beverly Hills Cop 4 and let Eddie Murphy be the star. I think if we got the MGM, Paramount, whatever, big studio release, I think we're getting Michael B. Jordan as Axel Foley's son, getting Eddie Murphy as Axel Foley, but he's second banana. He's not the lead. You're getting a bunch of Jack Harlow's going to have some sort of a cameo in it. You're going to try and get like Dua Lipa to do something, or Chapel Roan. You're going to get a lot of like clickbait younger artists to appeal to a wider audience. You'd struggle, I think, to get them to sign off on having Rosewood and Taggart in more than like one scene of the movie, honestly, because they'd want it to be focused more on the young so that they could project it. The next movie is going to be Michael B. Jordan, Axel Foley Jr. with no Eddie Murphy this time because they've set it up and blah, blah, the studio thing. So I think it is a double-edged sword. Cinema release probably means less Eddie, less legacy characters, if any, way more of like this is an action comedy that could be a Beverly Hills Cop or not. We just kind of are making it that.
And I wonder, like I mentioned Jay and Silent Bob and how that was done. And again, I don't know too much about why Kevin Smith decided to do that, but maybe he knows his audience. Maybe he knows that, again, it's very, his films are very cult still, or very niche, that you're not going to get a wide release. I was a bit sad because I remember seeing at a PAX cinema, seeing Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back.
That was a great movie to see in cinemas. It was so fun.
And yeah, and the crowd was amazing. To think that it sort of got to the point where you're having a sequel that you think there'd be enough nostalgia for, and it'd be like something you have to go and find on streaming, or do a digital download or whatever it is. It was like, that's kind of sad. The other film I was thinking of that I was wondering if they thought, hang on a sec, people have nostalgia for movies, but don't always turn up, so don't spend too much money and don't put it as is Indiana Jones is the perfect latest example where they spent $1 million, more than $1 million, but millions on that movie and lost a lot of money, Disney, because I guess the assumption was everyone loves Harrison Ford and Indiana Jones. I think people do, but people have moved on too, and COVID, and it's very hard. I still feel like these couple of years of COVID, it's very hard to, people's viewing habits, and we've touched on it a bit already before, that people maybe are more comfortable. People have got really good home cinema setups and are happy to stay at home and relax and watch it on their own terms and not have other people around them coughing and sputtering and all that sort of stuff. If people are happy to watch at home, that doesn't translate to ticket sales. So maybe Netflix were like, you know what, this is the perfect movie. We're not going to over capitalize on it. We'll get it. We'll get Axel in there, and if it becomes bigger, it becomes bigger. But let's,
Well, I think that's something that Netflix, I think, did do well with this movie. Is they did kind of let it be a Beverly Hills Cop movie. They're like, all right, this is gonna, and I think Disney has a big problem at the moment, and this is a larger scale, but I think Indiana Jones was a victim of it, in that anything that comes out at the cinemas now that is Disney, is going to be on Disney Plus in like 2 weeks, maybe 3. So the urgency and the incentive isn't there.
Yes.
If you have a Disney Plus subscription, you are seeing that friggin' movie in a couple of weeks, maybe shorter if it doesn't do well at the box office. So if it's a Netflix movie and it goes out in cinemas, maybe it's a victim of the same thing. And then people don't watch it on Netflix because they're like, oh, no one saw it at the cinema, it must be bad. Instead of no one saw it at the cinema because they fucking knew they could see it at home, on their subscription. Which means hopefully we might get another Beverly Hills Cop movie, which I'm all for. And I do love.
I do think we will get another one.
Well, I love that this movie didn't do the thing that a lot of like sequels that come back decades after the last one does, which is they try, and again, we're talking about Indiana Jones. Indiana Jones did, is they try to make it a wrap-up movie. Like, this is the end of this grand adventure we've been on, and we're going to have the final Indiana Jones movie. There is no more Indiana Jones movies after the Dial of Destiny. He's an old man. He's literally hung up the hat at the end of the movie. And Axel F could have done that. It could have gone the direction where at the end of the movie, because Eddie has all that thing with his daughter, I'm like, okay, the end of this movie is going to be, he realizes what he needs to do is retire, just like Jeffrey did, move to Beverly Hills, be like old man Axel and live with his daughter or live near his daughter and be a good father. Instead, the movie ends like the others. He beats the bad guy. He gets shot. He gets fucked up a little bit. He hangs out with Billy and Rosewood. Carry on until infinity. Like, that was one of the best things for me about this movie, is when it ended, I was like, oh, they realize something that a lot of movies forget. Axel Foley is a fictional character. He's not a real guy. He doesn't have to exist under the same rules as real guys. Like Taggart can retire and come back and somehow be the captain of the Beverly Hills Police Department. Who gives a shit? I don't give a shit. Shut up. I don't care. It's great. Axel Foley can be an old guy who's still running around shooting bad guys and crashing cars and causing mischief. And at the end of the movie, he doesn't have to realize that life is fleeting and he has to like do the right thing now and he has to retire and, you know, live. No, no, he being Axel Foley. That was the smartest thing this movie did, in my opinion. Like,
and that's it.
Axel is Axel. Axel is Axel.
Okay, so what do you think about the daughter, or having a daughter and having this whole? I kind of was similar to you. I actually liked that it was a daughter and it wasn't a son. I feel like the son would have been too obvious or too easy.
It also been real cock heavy. If you've got Axel's son, Taggart, Rosewood, this new detective partner, Kevin, like at least there was one female character who showed up more than once, because they don't do that a lot in Beverly Hills Cop movies unless it's like a love interest. I like that. I liked the daughter as a character. I liked that her whole vibe was kind of like, I don't give a fuck, and she really didn't let that go until the end when he was like, "You're all right. I fucked up." She was like, fucking finally. Like, she didn't have a thing 3/4 way through the movie. She was like, "Oh, Daddy, I'm sorry." Like, no, it sounds like he was a dick and he is the parent. So it isn't on him. I thought their relationship was really well written. I thought it's a hard character to write because you've made her a lawyer, not a cop. So she's kind of in no man's land in this movie. Like, she can't get involved in the action scenes. They do plant the seed, like, you taught me how to get in a handcuff and get out of a trunk and shoot a gun. So you know at some point she's going to shoot a gun and get out of handcuffs, maybe even a trunk. They Chekhov's gun the shit out of that. But they also set up that she's not interested in that bullshit. She, like, at multiple points in the movie, she sets up like, no, I only care about getting my client out of jail. I don't care about this shit. I'm not a fucking cop. I'm not some dickhead with a gun. I'm a lawyer. And it was good she stuck to that. It did put her in a bit of a kind of no man's land position where, like, there was really only so much you could do with her character.
Yes.
But I think what they did do with her character was fantastic. I think she's one of the best written characters in the movie. And I thought their relationship was great. And I don't know how you felt about it, but I, you know, as a dad with a daughter, like, I see any dad-daughter movie and instantly I'm like, oh, this is going to hit harder than if I didn't have kids.
Yeah. Oh, no, 100%. Yeah.
Which is like, you went there for me. I'm like, oh God, I got to try harder. What if she grows up and she hates me? You know, like, there's that stuff that just happens when you have kids. And yeah, seeing that,
I couldn't agree. I couldn't agree more. I thought that was some of the better written stuff. And like you said, it wasn't like she just like, just folded like a deck of cards early. She really resented him for the longest time in this film, and it really took a lot for that to sort of reconcile itself. And even then, even at the end when she went across to the diner where he was having his steak or his burger and brings him back to the hospital, there was still that sort of, we're good now, but you still have to earn your stripes kind of thing. It still wasn't like,
not all is forgiven. We've just started. We've started on a path to maybe talking more than once every 5 years.
I know we talk about this sometimes in film. Sometimes you don't need all the backstory. You don't have to have all the exposition explained to you. But God, I wanted to know who the mum was.
See, I felt the opposite. I fucking love that we didn't find out who the mum was.
Oh, okay.
Because I feel like it just would have gotten in the way. Because they would have done something where they would have tried to make her, like, I can't remember the character's name, but the actress from the first movie, who's his friend, or they would have tried to...
Jenny Summers. Well, see, the crazy thing was, initially, my brain just was a little bit off. Just the calibration wasn't quite right when I was watching this. And when she said Saunders, I was thinking, oh my God, they've gone with the mum being Jenny Saunders, and then I was, oh no, it was Jenny Summers. But for the about 5 minutes there, I'm like, oh, they've gone with the mum being his friend, the blonde from the first movie. I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool. We'll probably meet her, and obviously that's a good, I wouldn't say a good throwback, but sometimes I do like that it's not always happy families when these things happen. That it's like, oh well, it's not always a happy ending. So if they parted ways and he's got a daughter out of it, whatever. But then, obviously that's why I thought with the whole Saunders thing and her going, obviously either That's the maiden name of her mum, assuming. Was
No,
that
yeah, but
explained?
they never,
They
no,
really explained it, yeah.
no, because I don't know that it is because when he's
Yeah.
talking about the wife, the ex-wife, it's
Mm.
very minimal. But when he's talking about Saunders, he doesn't say it like, he doesn't like, oh yeah, Saunders, just like your mother. Like he's just making fun of the name in
Yeah. I
general.
love that. I actually really like that scene.
Saunders,
S
Saunders. That was a great scene.
A U N.
Like that was I felt like that was classic. Hey, let's just
Mm,
put the camera on and let Eddie Murphy just say some
mm,
shit for 2 minutes and see what happens.
mm,
Um, I thought like you, I didn't think it was gonna be James. I thought for a moment it was gonna be Bogomil's daughter, maybe was the ex, and she would come in
ah,
and it would be a big part because I thought she was a great character in the sequel, and I thought they always could have done a
mm,
bit more with her. But no Bogomil, no Bogomil's daughter, none of that. We're done with all that. They're gone forever.
mm,
Um,
yeah.
which I guess fine. You don't want too many cooks.
Mm.
Um,
I did actually, the throwback I did love was the photo of them fishing that they
oh,
had.
that was great.
Then he
Yeah.
goes, "Hang on, you're in this photo." He goes, "No, that's where Wesley Snipes."
That was great. But see,
Yeah.
that was I liked that scene. I thought it was really good. And then as soon as that scene finished, I'm like, if this was like 80s Beverly Hills Cop, he would have
Mm,
just started like accusing them of being racist and saying like
mm,
horrible things about them being
mm,
racist and really made it a big they and look, great. I'm glad that we've moved on. And that isn't the go-to bit, but I also feel like Axel Foley, if he's trying to get out of a situation where there's three white guys and him, and the white guys are like, "That's you," and he's like, "No, that's Wesley Snipes." I don't know why he wouldn't accuse them of being racist and try and
mm,
flip it and start saying some shit to them
mm,
to kind of throw them off. Again, like just little bits of it, it felt like they took the edge off. So they
mm,
didn't want to say racist because that might not do well with the algorithm. They didn't want to swear because that might not do well with the algorithm. They didn't want to, there'll be drugs, but no one will do drugs except for that
mm,
one tiny moment where Kevin Bacon snorts some coke, kind of out of nowhere. Like there was, I don't know, it was kind of not quite dirty enough.
mm,
Like Detroit in 1 and 2 at the start, Detroit is friggin' dirty. And
mm.
this one at the start, he's driving around. He knows every single person who lives in
Yeah.
Detroit.
Like,
Hey, what's up?
Axel,
Hey,
yeah,
Axel. Hey,
fuck
I can
you.
arrest you. Fuck you, Foley. Like he knows every single person
Yeah.
in Detroit,
Mm,
which is fine. That was a bit of fun, giving him a bit of I don't know, love in the community, but it wasn't a dirty, like grimy town where like Mickey is gonna get shot in the back of the head in front of a cop's apartment and
mm.
no one will fucking say anything.
Yeah.
um, I also thought that like the scene in the house when they were going to look at the house that's next door to where the drug den is,
Yeah.
and when Serge or Sergey or
Axel
Serge,
Foley!
love that he was there, love that they let him fuck around a bit. And I thought the woman who played the real estate agent
Mm,
was really fun. That
mm.
was a really fun scene where
Yes.
she's just like, she's just doesn't give a fuck. She's like,
Yeah.
"Oh, you two are so cute. I kind of honestly hate it." Like,
Yeah.
and then she's like, "Yeah, no, fuck it. I hate this house. It's terrible. No,
Yeah.
it's okay. It's not bad." Or a kid. It's like, "I got a kid. He's a
Oh, that
loser."
was so good. I had
But you
to.
can tell
That was the
Glass
one
is
bit I
like,
did rewind back and go, "Oh my god,
fuck.
can you believe that you just said she said this about her own kid?" She says,
It's
"Oh,
fucking. That was
because he's
pretty fun.
yeah,
I felt like that should have been played by someone like Jenny Slate or something with like that should have been a cameo scene, but it
mm,
just wasn't. It was I looked her up and I have forgotten, but I cannot remember if I've ever seen that actor or anything, but she was great, and I hope that she gets a lot more work out of this
mm,
because she crushed it. Oh wait, is that? Oh no, I have seen it before. It's Nazim Pedrad, and she was in Aladdin as Dahlia. Anyway, no one's gonna care about than
oh,
me, but I do know her face because my kids love Aladdin and they watch it a lot. And she's a voice in Big Mouth and things. Anyway, I hope she gets a lot more
yeah.
on camera stuff because I think she absolutely smashed that scene, and that was probably
Yes,
the most. That was the closest in the whole movie where they had someone who matched Eddie Murphy's kind of nonsense, I guess,
yeah,
for
yeah,
lack of a better
yeah.
word. He's fun, I don't give a fuck kind of attitude.
Mm,
Um, and it's a shame they didn't let him cook with her a bit more.
mm,
Like I get the whole plot thing is like he wants to get away from her so he can jump the fence and check out what's going on next door. But it would have been fun for the two of them. Like she obviously wanted
He
to
was
fuck him as soon as
flirting a
she
bit
found out
with
she was
yeah,
well,
yeah,
she found out he was rich, so she's like,
yeah.
yeah. That'd
Yeah.
be great. And was
And it was
making up
famous
like
just
pet
saying she
names
was
to things.
single, and
Yeah,
yeah.
that was great. I really thought that scene was a lot of fun and showed a lot of promise. And there's stuff throughout this movie that really shows you that I think Eddie's still got it. I don't know if it was he wasn't. He's a smart, like I said, he's a smart businessman. I don't know if he was trying to like hold it back a little so the movie could be more family friendly, wider reception, more people watch it. Netflix gives him more money to make more shit, makes another. I honestly don't know, or if it was like a mandate from Netflix, like no, you can't like go above a 6. We don't want to hear certain words. We don't want to see Axel Foley do certain things. If you want to make a Netflix movie, here's the rules. But things like the helicopter crash, I thought that was a pretty funny scene, like just little moments there where he's like, yeah, that wasn't so bad. Like it was better than someone who couldn't fly a helicopter, not
But
as
you
good
know
as
what?
someone who was good at flying helicopters,
Well,
and
the
then
crazy
shooting the
thing,
cabin. And
I will give them credit for, because I feel like I haven't really seen that before. Like,
no, that
you
was a
see
new thing.
helicopters, sometimes they might go low down a streetscape, but like the fact that someone's ex-helicopter wasn't maybe great at it, has PTSD, and is not good at the job, and then
I love
it's
that he
kind of like
sucked at
this.
it the whole time and then crashed. He didn't
Yeah.
like suck at it for a few minutes and then suddenly get his mojo back. No, he just flat out sucks at flying helicopters. Great
Yeah,
bit.
and the fact that Kevin Bacon could actually fly up and he can actually shoot to it, I don't know. I liked it. It was just felt different enough that it was like, well, you don't see that every day in an action film. Like it's not. I feel like
No,
you and me have seen enough action films now that when you see, unfortunately, there's some things that always go relatively similar. He's like, I've seen that before,
and you know what was
and the fact
great?
is, yeah,
It didn't feel too contrived. Like
no,
they were locked up in a police station. They are police. They know that this police station has a helicopter. Like it isn't a stretch for Axel to A, remember that the guy who's with him is a pilot, and B, realize that going out the front door isn't an option. What's plan B? Oh my God, this guy can fly helicopters this place. Like in terms of action set pieces in an action comedy movie, normally to get to the flying the helicopter scene, there's some pretty big leaps as an audience that we're asked to take to be like, okay, sure, I'll believe there just happens to be a helicopter. Why not? No, this like in movie logic, this was pretty legit.
yeah,
It made sense, and then they did it. I tell you, this is a tiny nitpick, but I'm wondering if you felt it too, because about the fourth time it shit me. Every single time there were two characters sitting in a car in this movie driving, like driver and passenger seat. It was always a static, dead-on shot through the windshield, and really, really clearly that car was hooked up to a trailer and they weren't driving, which is how they shoot. I get it. That's how they shoot movies. Very rarely is the person driving the car actually driving the car. It's hooked up to a car in front. They have a trailer or
yeah,
a rig system that pulls them along, and they pretend to steer, but they don't actually do anything. But
yeah,
normally you get some different camera angles, you get some wides of the car driving.
yeah,
This one was just like, bam, dead on, two guys in front, really, really obviously the car is not being driven. And
yeah.
every time they came back to them driving, which was a lot because it's Beverly Hills, it was the same dead on shot. And I was like, these fucking guys are on a trailer. Like, come on, give me
Yeah.
something. Give me a cut. Did you notice that? Or is it just me being pedantic?
Maybe you being pedantic, but I'm sure I'm pedantic in different areas. To be honest,
I'll completely own being pedantic on that.
look. You know what? I'm probably gonna watch it again, and I'll probably notice it heaps this time and go.
But you won't be able to unsee it now that I've brought it up. I've ruined it for you. Sorry.
Yeah, look. I mean, look. There's definitely some camera tricks that in movies that yeah, you're right. It gets sick of either they overuse it or don't cut enough away from it or have enough couple of different shots. But to be honest, off the top of my head, I can't even think of like I remember when there's obviously a lot of talking scenes between him and his daughter in a car, and I feel like there's a lot of 1-2 shots and stuff like that. But yeah, you're right. I mean, I don't know. I sometimes think, well, it's better than having a car dragging it than.
I tell you what I did like now that I've complained about that one thing is that this movie was shot, I thought, overall like an 80s film. They didn't try and get too fancy with any of like in the shootout scenes, the final big shootout of the house. It was really like down the line. Here's the shot of them diving in. Here's the machine guns. Cut to the bad guy getting shot. Cut to the good guy getting like. It felt really in sync with the last three movies. Like you could watch 1, 2, 3, 4 back to back, I think, and feel like you're watching 4 cohesive movies
Yeah.
because they didn't try and get like, it's not like suddenly they're like, okay, we're going to Michael Bay the shit out of Axel
Yes.
F and we're going to have
100%.
crazy stuff going on. No, it was still very down to earth. They never forgot the fact that, yeah, this is Axel Foley. Like, he's not a super cop. He's smart and he's wisecracking, but he's not Stallone. He's not Schwarzenegger. He was never meant to be. So let's keep it real simple.
And I
I
think
thought that was great.
the only right at the end when they sort of fired their weapons and that they did slow mo there.
Yeah,
They did slow mo, but you're right. They didn't even. It did feel like you're right. You could watch all these movies back to back and not feel like they were from different eras too much. In that, like you said, like I recently saw Bad Boys 4. But one of the things they advertised was this whole POV of shooting, where they did a. Do you know about this?
No,
About
I
how they
don't.
did. So there's a particular scene where we sort of see a POV of them obviously shooting the people that are the bad guys, and I've actually seen, and again, I don't know if it was on social media or one of these things. I'd seen it advertised before I saw the film, where they showed the camera rigs that Will Smith and Martin Lawrence had to wear to get the right shot, because it's actually them walking around and going bang, 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 and it's the camera kind of almost sits in front of them on a rig. Almost they're like, I guess, sort of wearing something like, what do you call it now? Why have I got a mental blank?
Like body cams?
Well, yeah, kind of like body cams. But what's the original? What's the thing? Steady cam.
Almost like a steady cam. Oh, wow, like a big proper camera.
It's obviously not a big proper camera, but it did feel like the first time I saw it, sort of a steady cam type thing where they've obviously got some sort of rig around the chest and their arm is out and the camera sits in front of, like, in a certain spot, obviously, so you can see the gun and them as they're actually moving. So it's actually them. But I thought, again, that's just the technology. And even in one of the last Bad Boys movie, they not quite Matrix it, but it was still a little bit of bullet time stuff happening,
right?
Following around and all that fancy stuff that everyone started experimenting with. This one, just keep it simple.
Yeah, man.
It works. It still works.
It's still exactly, and I think that's probably my biggest takeaway from this movie, and thing that I loved the most about this movie, made me happiest about this movie, because I'm nitpicking, but we're making a podcast. I'm trying to talk about stuff. Overall, I really enjoyed this, and what I enjoyed is, at no point in this movie did I feel like they forgot that this is an Eddie Murphy movie, and the whole point of this movie existing is to see Eddie Murphy be Axel Foley again in Beverly Hills. Let's not do a thing where it's Beverly Hills Cop, but for some reason half the movie's in Dubai or something weird like that. Like, no, it's fucking a Detroit cop in Beverly Hills. It is Axel Foley being Axel Foley. He's a fish out of water. He's his backup in this one is compromised in different ways. Either they don't believe him or they're not cops anymore. Great, like, kind of put him back a little bit than where he was the last time we saw him. There's no Bogomil who loves him. There's no, like, support that he used to have from Billy being, like, high up in the police. All of that I thought was really good. And I finished the movie and I was like, fuck yeah, I'm glad that exists. Like, I is it my favorite Beverly Hills Cop movie? No, I think Beverly Hills Cop is one of those film series that runs in descending order, basically. Like, every film is fun and good, but not as good as the one before. And that's kind of it's been a while since I've watched 3, but I still feel like 3 was more peak Eddie than 4. But time marches on. All 4 of them are great. I'd watch this one again any old time. They stack up together. It's fun. They lean into the nostalgia a bit, but not so much that you finish the movie and be like, well, that was just fucking 97 minutes of them being like, remember that thing from the other movie? Like, they actually let this be its own movie. And that, again, coming back to the daughter character, I think that really is one of the smartest things, because brand new character who really earns being in the movie, who has a life outside of the other characters in the movie, a believable one. She exists whether or not Axel Foley is in this movie. Her story goes on whether or not Axel Foley is in the movie. Really smart stuff. And it's yeah, it's Eddie Murphy, and they're letting him cook. Great,
Mm.
like really, it's hard to ask for more in 2024. Really, yeah, I don't know, like it's fun. I had fun. I had
Yeah,
fun with this
I did
movie.
too. I had fun. Like again, like they ticked all the boxes for the nostalgia. Absolutely, did it all make sense? Like I said, like I absolutely, I would have loved to have seen Taggart maybe in a slightly different role because I personally I didn't believe he was retired. Like you don't just come back and then just somehow fly up the ranks. Like that's just not how that works. Um,
He also doesn't seem like good enough of a cop to be a captain at this point. Like,
no, no,
kind of shit at his job and shit at life.
yes,
I feel
yeah,
like somebody been like, you need to stand down.
yeah.
Like Jeffrey, I buy. Jeffrey seemed
You
like he
know,
grew up.
I actually like that. That was what I didn't expect, and I felt like that was the most believable. I
And
felt
Jeffrey's a
like,
sniveling, like kind of he's a
mm,
company man, you know. He knows how to grease palms and talk to the right people, and he doesn't need to be a great cop. He's a great politician more than a great cop, and so it makes
but
sense he'd be
but I
captain.
kind of like that we actually saw that him and Axel go way back too. Like we know
Yeah,
that from the movies, but we don't really know that they pretty much almost like graduated together, kind of thing.
that
Like
was a
they've
nice touch.
yeah.
That was a nice touch.
I
I
like
like that
that.
scene in the car's like, we're the same age. We're the same age. Like that
Yeah,
was really fun to
yeah.
remind the audience that like, oh my God, yeah, like these guys are actual friends and not just like
Mm,
co-workers.
yeah.
Really,
No,
really
I
well
did.
done.
I really like that. Again, it was great to see Taggart in the movie. It's nothing against him, the character, and or the actor. I just thought it was for me. It was we were already going on a bit of a stretch anyway with this movie, but I thought that was
It was a little
brilliant.
shoehorned. A little
Yeah.
shoehorn making Taggart the
Well,
captain.
yeah, I kind of feel like Billy still should have been. Maybe they could have had to. Yeah, like you said, all that alternative,
But
like you
why not just
said.
make Kevin Bacon the captain? Like you're gonna have a dirty cop. At least then there's a parallel between you used to have Bogomil, who like was a hard ass, but the best of
Mm,
the best, and now
mm,
you've got this Kevin Bacon character who's a hard ass and is a crooked cop.
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
and then
maybe.
Billy comes back, and maybe Billy becomes captain in movie logic. You know, he gets his badge
Mm,
back, and they're like, "Hey, we need a captain now," and he's like, "Oh, all right."
mm,
And then
yeah,
Taggart be like, "Jesus Christ, Rosewood captain! Oh, I'm glad I'm retired." And you could have had some
yeah.
fun with that or something.
Mm,
Yeah, and that's what I'm talking about. Little zigs where I would have liked a zag, maybe less
mm.
thinking. Maybe there was a draft where they did have. Who knows, man? Yeah, this is all nitpicking and
Yeah,
pie in the skying. But there's a couple of moments they
yeah.
could have done something a little cleaner.
And I believe, oh geez, have you got it up there in front of you, the Rotten Tomatoes scores? Because I feel like this is like really up there. Last time I heard, they definitely had it pretty high up. Um,
That's a
you're
look.
going to beat me to it.
I'm gonna beat you to it. 66% tomato
Oh,
meter, 80% audience score.
yeah, okay. Yeah. So that's
80%
decent.
audience score is like that's what you want. This
Yeah.
movie is for people who love Beverly Hills Cops movies. It's
Mm,
not a movie to try and create a new generation of fans.
mm,
Like you like it or you don't. It's kind of the attitude of this movie, which is great. Like watch
yeah.
it, don't watch it. We don't give a shit. We know that the
Mm,
people who love Beverly Hills Cop are fucking tuning in to watch
mm.
this movie. So
And another scene actually, just before we sort of taper off, he has his famous Detroit Lions jacket on, which is the updated version. It's a newer Detroit Lions
which I liked.
jacket, I should say, from probably the last couple of years. I remember seeing that one around. But then is it Red Wings? Is he at the or
I think
Detroit?
Detroit Red Wings is the hockey
Yeah,
team. Yeah.
and he's a hockey game, which is again a random thing. But then he leaned into the race almost. Like, oh, you're assuming because I'm black and blah blah.
That was pretty funny.
Yeah,
That was very funny.
that was funny, and he's oh,
And I like that
yeah,
character,
yeah,
Woody, whatever he was, Woodman. He was a
yeah,
fun character. I would have even liked a bit more of him. Honestly, he was good.
yeah. But no, look, I'm with you. I don't want to be a nitpicker either. I think you're never going to really replicate the first one, and even probably the second, like we discussed back in episode 6. Can you believe we talked about Beverly Hills Cop in episode 6?
6.
Episode 6. This is episode, what, 52 now?
I mean,
Yeah,
that's a
52.
good indication of how much we like the Beverly Hills Cop
Mm,
movies, particularly 2, is that
mm,
we wanted to get to it real friggin' quick.
yeah.
Real quick.
And I will say, I think just off the top of my head, this is the first franchise or first set of sequels that we've gone back to only the second time outside of Scream and Halloween. I don't think we've spoken about any other franchise twice. So this will be.
You may be right.
Yes, I think I am. I thought I had a quick look. I was pretty sure we were coming to this for the second time, and no other franchise had that. And there's some franchises we still have not talked about, which I still want to. They're on this metaphorical list we have that keeps moving. Because it's funny, someone mentioned Pirates of the Caribbean the other day and Dead Man's Chest. I'm like, God, that's a good movie that I'd love to talk about. And I was like, I haven't talked about that either. But yeah.
I mean, look, there's a lot of big sequels that we missed or haven't gotten to yet or got on the list and got bumped because there's a lot of when I walked out of the cinema and was like, we have to talk about Top Gun Maverick now. There's a lot of stuff that got bumped way back when. It turns out I was right about that one because it went out to be one of the biggest films ever.
And one of our best viewed / listened to episodes.
Because people know that movie is perfect and amazing. And this one is, it's pretty damn good. Axel F is pretty damn good. I wish it was just called Beverly Hills Cop 4. But that's me. And
could they have done something interesting with the word Axel F and made sort of a 4 somewhere, or don't they do that a little bit with number plates now? People do a 4 instead of an A or something. I don't know. They could have been a bit more creative and put the 4.
Yeah, they could have called they could have called it Beverly Hills Cop Axel Foley, but put Axel 4 LEY, and it could have been Axel Foley. But that would have been so confusing for the audience to be like, what the fuck is this movie called?
Yeah. Okay.
And that's already too long of a title. I think yeah, I mean, yeah, all right. I get it. From a marketing point of view, I get why it's not called number 4. I get 4 is a scary number in franchises, and most films avoid. And if you're listening to this and you're like, I don't think so, go check your film franchises and see how many of them have the actual number 4, or do you just call it number 4? I'm talking about your Halloween, Friday 13th, all of them.
When you mentioned it earlier in the podcast, I was sort of thinking about it, and we sort of, again, easily get into this movie and get distracted on all these different things we want to talk about. Do you think maybe, because there's famously for some franchises, there have been trilogies that when you start going to a 4, it's kind of like, we don't really want to go 4 because then it's sort of outside that trilogy. Sometimes it's like they want their cake and eat it too. It's like, well, if it's shit, we can just say, well, it was Beverly Hills Cop, Axel Foley, or Axel F. It's not. I don't know. It's just I do sometimes wonder if sometimes that the idea of 1, 2, and 3 is a nice round trilogy, and then
I think as audiences we're trained to believe that the first one is the first one. If it's great and it gets a sequel, it's because the first one was great and we want more. And if the sequel is pretty good and we like it and we get a third, I think we're trained as audiences to believe that the third is like we talked about in our beloved Scream, it's the concluding chapter. The reason that an audience goes to number 3 is because, yes, it's another sequel, but this is where we wrap it all up. It's going to all come together with number. There's a reason. So when a film goes on to make a number 4, I think the audience response is kind of like, oh, what? Aren't we done with this? I thought we did this. We did 3. We're back from I don't know about this. So I think that's why they ditched the number 4 a lot. And people are like, oh, did they make another? And I think it's a psychological thing. Something like they made a 4th Beverly Hills Cop. You go, oh, they made another Beverly Hills Cop. And I think it changes the way you think about it. Mission Impossible, Fast and the Furious, all of the big franchises in our history that had numbers in them. Almost, not every, obviously, but almost every single one will not have the number 4. Even weird franchises that throw in a 3 on the third movie when the first 2 didn't have numbers. And looking at you, Alien, they won't do a 4. They'll piss off back to some other different title because you don't like it. So I get it. I just, you know what? I don't think there's anything wrong. 4 is not a dirty word, Hollywood. Bring it back, all right? Justice for 4s. Justice for the number 4.
Well, I guess... Are we done?
I think we're done. I think we did.
I'll just say in closing too, I enjoyed watching Beverly Hills.
If you haven't watched it, go watch it.
Yeah, 100%. Netflix, get your subscription. Just have it for a week. Go and watch it. It's good fun. Is it top tier Beverly Hills Cop? No. Is it bottom tier? I don't think so either. I think it's probably still in the middle. It's probably sits in snug between 3 and 2, maybe, or it's on par with 3 and almost 2 with all the characters.
Is it the
back.
best thing that Eddie Murphy's done in 10 years?
Probably, but
I think it's better than Coming to America 2.
Yeah.
I maybe the only thing that really is like on par in terms of him being awesome in the last 10 years would be Dolomite Is My Name, because I really enjoyed that movie. But looking outside of that, I'm looking at some lower tier. If we were to rank the Eddie Murphy Hall of Fame, the last 10, 15 years, they're not going in the top tier. They're going in the bottom tier. But I think this is the best movie he's made in a while. And God damn it, I'm so happy that Eddie Murphy is still making movies. I hope he makes movies forever. I hope he makes Axel Foley movies forever. I hope he makes whatever he wants, honestly. But if this is where he's at, I think he's back. I think this is... I'm prepared to say at this point, until I see the next thing he does, I think Eddie's back. And I could not be happier to have one of my favorites return to form.
And just move to Beverly Hills, man. Just stop going back to Detroit. Just retire there. Come to Beverly Hills. I don't know. That's where I expected the movie to go. But anyway, that's maybe in a whole other podcast when we come back for the third movie. So on that note, just remember, not all sequels suck.
Do, 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 do.
Hey, Sequel Sucks fans. Can you do me a big favour, please? Angus and myself would really love if you could like the podcast, subscribe to it would be even better, and then, especially if you are keeping tabs on what we're doing, and we are doing stuff more frequently, yay, can you hit that little bell button, and that'll give you notifications to let you know when new content has dropped on YouTube. All that stuff is greatly appreciated by both of us, and also the guests that we have on the show. We've got some exciting stuff coming up, and look, there's a lot of sequels getting churned out at the moment, and there's some old sequels we still want to get back to, but we really appreciate the support. And if you have a friend or someone that likes to chat movies at work, or someone that you think might be interested in hearing us speak, or at least checking us out, share the link. It'd be greatly appreciated. And again, thank you. Cheers all the way from good old Australia. Cheers.
Hey, Sequel Suck fans.
By definition alone, they're inferior films.
I almost sequel remake. A quick warning. This episode is spoilers. Over.